Alright guys, JC the Sniper here again, and I've got another blade review. Today we're reviewing the Byrd Cara Cara Rescue model. And that would be it right there. Alright, basically if you've watched my review of the Cara Cara, this is pretty much the same in a lot of respects. It's going to be different in a few areas, which we'll talk about. But well, basically the blade. That's the only difference between these two knives. The Byrd Cara Cara and the Byrd Cara Cara Rescue. As you can see, the handle's the same, the clip is the same, the hole is the same. It's just that blade shape that's different. So, anyway, we'll get the specs out of the way here. This knife weighs, I believe, 3.6 ounces. 3.7 ounces. It's 8 3/4 inches overall. 4 and 27/32 closed. The blade length is an even 4 inches. The cutting edge of the blade is 3 3/8. So they count this in the blade length, but not in the cutting edge, obviously. Blade thickness, 1/8 of an inch. And so that's pretty much it for the specs on the size and weight. So 3.7 ounces for a knife with a 4-inch blade of this size is pretty good. It's definitely a light knife. And this is the lightweight model with the FRN handles. I also have a G10 model, and this thing is a beast. This weighs, I think, 6.6 ounces, so it's heavy. Maybe it's 6.4, but, you know, it's a really heavy knife. It's over 6 ounces for a 4-inch blade folder. And that's because it's got those heavy steel liners, and the G10, which is not that light. Whereas this has FRN and thinner liners in there. So it's able to... it just makes the knife a lot lighter. So that's a good thing. I do believe that the standard Cara Cara is lighter. And let me check. It is... well, Spider Code tells me it's 3.8. I don't think they're correct though, because holding these two knives, this one feels heavier. I don't know. Maybe I'm imagining that. I think this knife is a little bit heavier than this one. So, I don't know exactly. Spyderco tells me this one's 0.1 ounces heavier. So if you believe Spyderco, this knife is slightly heavier. It feels lighter to me though. Perhaps that's just the way weight is centered and the way it handles. I'm not sure. So anyway, on with the talking points and such. Philosophy of use for this knife. What are you going to do with it? Well, it's obviously the Rescue Edge model, which means it's a fully serrated knife. Which means you're not going to be probably using it for a lot of the same things that you would use this knife for. In general, I don't advocate this type of a blade because I don't see much point behind it. Like, it's very limited in its uses sometimes. Now you can definitely do a lot with them, but I just think it's very limited. Basically what this is for, what it's intended for, is for people who want to be able to cut through thick, heavy materials such as seat belts, rope, you know, stuff like that requires a good amount of cutting, a lot of, you know, a hard, forceful cut and a sharp knife without stabbing things. So, for instance, if you're an EMT, it might be great to have one of these in your pocket. Because if you roll up on a car accident, you need to get somebody out of a car, you can't get to the buckle, you pop your Cara Cara Rescue out, you can stick this in, and you're not going to stab them, because it's got that sheep's foot shaped blade. So you can slide that in there, hook it under their seatbelt, cut the seatbelt. So for that kind of thing, it's great. And, you know, if you need to cut rope, if you are, you know, I don't know, if you're in any profession where you cut rope a lot, or you just do something like that. Maybe if you're a rancher and you're, I don't know, cutting ropes for some reason. Or perhaps, I guess, if you were baling hay and you're cutting twine for some reason and you do that a lot, this might be good for that, because this is great for cutting things like rope, twine, seat belts, anything like that. So if you're going to do a lot of that, you might be better off going with that blade. Other than that, I think these blades are more useful. This is not going to excel quite as much in cutting a thick rope. If you're going to go cut a lot of half-inch to, you know, up rope, maybe inch-thick rope, then you're going to want to go with this. If you're going to be cutting just about anything else, you'd want this. Because if you're going to, say you're going to slice some cheese, you'd rather have this. If you're going to skin a squirrel, which I used my Cara Cara for the other day, you aren't going to want that. I mean, you can't skin a squirrel with that. You know, so day-to-day tasks, this is just tends to be more useful. Also, the blade shape lends itself more to slicing. So if you need to slice something, you know, vegetables, something like that, if you're preparing a meal, or if you need to slice a person in a defensive use, which I would advocate this blade for. This is an excellent blade for a tactical folder, a defensive blade. It's got the size and the reach and the ergonomics to function well in that role. You know, you got a good piercing tip, you got a good slash cutting belly. This knife doesn't have either of those. You can't pierce with it. You can't really slash with it. I mean, could you cut someone with it? Yeah. You could cut someone pretty nasty with it. However, it's just not, it doesn't lend itself to that. If you slash with this, you're going to hit right here, you're going to get a very, you know, whatever kind of wound channel you can create with basically the tip of this. Whereas with this thing, with that roll, you can slice a lot more as you cut, which just makes it better for that. Which is why they have you know, you see curved blades for defense a lot, like a curved serrated blade, perhaps. People would use that. So, you know, you're not going to use that for that. So anyway, on to the rest of the junk about this knife. Speed of deployment, well, let's talk about the steel. The steel is HCR 13 MOV, the same steel as the Byrd Cara Cara and the Cara Cara G10. So it's kind of, it's close to an AUS 8. It's a decent steel. I found it to be rust resistant and corrosion resistant. This knife has held up well. Carried it all summer in sweaty pockets and all that good stuff while I was working. Got fire extinguisher crap all over it, and it let it sit on the blade before I realized it was on there, and it's supposed to be corrosive, and it rubbed off, didn't corrode the blade any, so I was happy about that. And I think it's held up well. I've gotten good performance out of my blades in HCR 13 MOV. Both of these, this one, which is actually my buddy Tomcat's, same guy who owned that SOG that I reviewed a couple days ago. Is this, you know, this one's obviously HCR, and then the Kershaw Oso Suite's also an HCR 13 MOV steel, and I've gotten good performance out of all of them. They take a pretty good edge, not nearly as sharp as the VG10, for instance, in Spyderco Endura Full Flat Ground, which you may have seen me review. This one takes a better edge. It's a harder steel. I like this steel better. However, for the price point, which you can pick one of these up for 20 bucks, it's hard to beat. That retails at $95. This retails at like $45. So for half the price from retail, it's hard to go wrong with a Cara Cara if you need something like this. And the blade shape, obviously, we've talked about. It's basically a sheep's foot blade. I'm not a huge fan of it, but, you know, it's definitely suited to some specific tasks, and if I needed to cut a lot of rope or seat belts, I would definitely get one of these. Speed is not quite as good as its little friend here, and this is due to mostly the fact that there is a much stronger spring in here than there is in this Cara Cara. I don't know why. However, you can see that, that's not that strong a spring. This one really snaps down. It's a much stronger spring. Much more difficult even to depress the lock back to get it closed. More difficult than my Endura. A lot more difficult. So, I don't know. It's kind of weird that it's so stiff. And that makes it a little bit trickier to pop out. I can still do it. I can still pop it out fine. It's just a little bit more difficult and not quite as quick. However, it's still pretty fast to come out, so I'm not going to complain too much about that. Lockup strength is great. No wiggle in this thing. And if it should start to wiggle side to side, it's adjustable. So we can fix that. Comes apart with all those torque screws. The strength of this knife, I'd say, is going to be great. It's, designed by Spyderco. It's an 1/8 inch thick blade all the way down to the tip. So no weakening towards the tip. And FRN just holds up well. And those stainless steel liners. So it should hold up very well. And I've seen that in my other Cara Caras. These have held up very well. They're very strong knives. Handle material we've talked about is FRN, and I like it. It's well textured. It works. Ergonomically, same as the other Cara Cara. It's got a good thumb ramp, good jimping, nice little finger choil up here if you want to choke up on it. You can choke back on it. Of course, more than likely with this blade, I'd hold it up here almost all the time. The only reason I'd choke back on a knife, for the most part, is if I'm using it for self-defense. Other than that, I'm probably going to want more control, and I'm going to move up as far as I can on the blade. So, for most tasks, or maybe just hold it here. But for most tasks, you're going to be forward on it. But it grips well in any of those gripping positions anyway. So, nicely done there. Finger choil here is jimped and very grippy thumb thing there, so you aren't going to slide forward if you're, doing something with it, which you shouldn't anyway, because you wouldn't stab with this. It's got that little David Bowie dent in there that's supposed to help keep you from depressing this, but you're not going to accidentally depress that. It's just not going to happen, because it's so strong. So, ergonomically speaking, very good. Feels great in your hand. It's easy and comfortable to hold, doesn't fatigue you in any way, lays in there nicely, just like the Cara Cara. If you want to hear more in depth, you can go watch my other Cara Cara videos, because I think I've got 2 other ones on it. Clip design is good. This is the same clip that was on my other Cara Cara lightweight, which is nice because the clip that was on my Cara Cara G10 was crap, and I had to reprofile it, which you may have seen me talk about, but it stuck up way too far and it bent, so I cut part of it off, rebent it, shaped it, and made it better. This one you won't need to do that with. It doesn't stick up too far. However, this tip does stick out a little bit. I'd probably bend that tip in if it were mine. The one on this is a little bit in further. See that tip is bent in some, whereas this one here is bent up some. So I think I'd bend that down a little bit, but I don't think it's bothered Tomcat any. I don't think he's had trouble with it, so not a big deal. So anyway, that's about it on the Cara Cara lightweight rescue model. Great blade if you need to cut a lot of seat belts, ropes, fibrous things of that nature, or you're going to do a lot of sawing through stuff that a straight edge might not handle quite so well. So limited in its usage. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it over a straight edge version. However, if you are in a, doing things a lot where you're going to be using it in that specific role, I think it's great. And if you're looking for a full serrated blade, I think this is an excellent option. And it is definitely a value, coming in around probably 20 bucks from Amazon, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. So, there you have it. Great value in my opinion. JC the Sniper, signing off.